Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to the second meeting of April 2017. Start the meeting with the pledge.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. So Carol is at our the BOCES meeting, so that's why she's absent. Mrs. Bose is ill, so she's absent, and the rest of us are here. So, final budget presentation from Ms. Lewis.
You all received a copy of the final proposed budget, and tonight I put before you a copy of the presentation also.
This printout is the same as what we have in our packet from earlier in the week, right?
Yes, it is. So the proposed revenues for the final budget of 17-18 reflects a real property tax increase that is within the tax cap of $179,490. The final budget, final state aid runs from the governor and the state budget, increase in state aid of $210,286. And that allowed us to reduce our unencumbered unassigned fund balance to $200,000, which is an overall reduction of $300,000 from 16-17. So we are on track to get back to not having to use that to balance our budget, which is what we want to do so that Standards & Poor's will be happier and we can, get back where we were before they did that report that they did in January. The proposed expenditures, we have included in the budget the purchase of a plow truck. I explained at the last meeting that we lost the truck. The lease of transportation fleet, and I want to be perfectly clear in stating that there is no bonding and no borrowing for this lease. This is strictly out of the general budget. We have cut other lines. We are selling our current fleet, provided this is the proposition is approved, and it is a cost-neutral initiative. We have a reduction of personnel costs through reassignments, retirements, and resignations, and the total is approximately $172,000 plus fringe benefits. We have a reduction of BOCES services, which will be reassigned to current district staff for a savings of $118,000. Our overall increase in expenses is less than 1% from 16-17. So we have, as I said, we are restructuring and reassigning duties. I wanted to make it clear that this budget, various BOCES services have been restructured. We've eliminated 1 day per week of tech support, reassigned to current district staff. We've eliminated 2 days per week of psychological educational testing and reassigned it to the current full-time psychologist. We've eliminated elimination of CSE services from BOCES and reassigned it to current district staff, along with any additional counseling services. And we are purchasing 800 hours of speech services for mandated services, and if there are additional services that need to be provided, they will be addressed during the school year, but we feel that 800 hours of speech service more than covers what we need for the mandated services that we have in this district. And we needed to do that because we had the speech teacher retired. So rather than hire someone, we co-cert it out, and it does receive state aid as well. All eliminated services will be provided by district staff. There is no elimination of any district staff. Anybody, it was strictly retirements, resignations that occurred. And we chose to reassign duties rather than fill those positions for cost savings. And I think that's the end. Questions?
Yeah, I know it's small potatoes, but why did our computer software line decrease by, from our revenue side by $11,408? I know, again, it's small, but
Well,
why?
it's still,
Yeah,
it's
I
a
mean-
decrease, and it's not something that we really want to see happen. And the reason it happened is because things were not being coded correctly, and they were not picked up. So when I went and filed the ST3, they weren't coded to the correct line. So now, before anything goes out to be purchased through the CBO, I put the budget code on it. Because we really need to be spending that money so that we can increase it and get back what was decreased.
okay, because last year we received almost 15,000, that's why I was, and, it's back down to
Right,
3,500.
and we didn't spend it
I see, okay.
correctly.
All right,
So that's a
So-
state aid line
That is a state aid
reduced if
line.
you don't spend the money.
That is correct. And it's unfortunate that some things went up to BOCES that didn't have the budget code on it, and they put a code on it, and then you really can't recode, that's not appropriate budgeting.
By the way, I appreciate, I have a lot of questions, but I appreciate the attention to the coding, because as I was going through this budget, I actually had to make a couple of phone calls and emails. I saw stuff moving around, and it turns out that things were bucketed under the wrong place, and it seems like you move things to where they need to be, so I appreciate that. And made it a little bit difficult to analyze this, but it is certainly the right way to go,
Well-
especially if you're going to lose revenue, so thank you for doing that.
And it'll be easier to analyze in future years.
Yeah.
And that does take about a 2-year cycle to be able to do that,
Mhm.
to get things where they're supposed to be.
Okay. Yeah, but I have a plethora of questions. I don't want to monopolize the whole thing, so feel free before I jump in, if you have anything.
I think you're on.
All right, so procedurally, we're going to vote on this. Is this a discussion we're having under discussion for the vote?
No.
Or we're just
no,
get
this
this out of the way now? Okay.
This is question with Drew.
All right, so let me just make sure I have my ducks in a row before I start asking questions. Increase in state aid from your second slide here is $210,286.
Correct.
So I think I've got this figured out, but I just want to make sure that we have this right. So we're looking at basic formula aid, which is 165 approximately, plus BOCES aid, plus textbook aid. Is that what counts for the 210,286?
That was my question.
Is it? Oh, there you go.
No,
All right.
No.
Let's try to add that up.
Basic formula aid
It's
and
165, 376.
small government assistance.
Small government assistance, 79,795.
Correct. But then you see the textbook aid was reduced, so you have to take that off.
Textbook aid was increased by 9,089.
Oh, not textbook aid, I mean computer software.
Computer software.
Right.
So it's basic formula aid plus small government assistance minus computer software and hardware aid.
From what I recollect, yes, because when I sit down to do this, there's a sheet that comes in, and there's certain things that get plugged into lines, and then whatever's left over, you plug it to formula aid.
I'm not being rude. I'm listening to you. I'm just adding things here. I want to see if.
That's fine.
165, 376 plus small government assistance.
79,795.
That's 245, and then minus
11,408.
it's 233.
We're at 210.
Yeah, and on the sheet that the state sends, it said 210 at the bottom, so there's other things that are
Okay.
factoring in there too.
Because this was printed at 9:35, so is that
9:35 on
the-
April
this
10th,
sheet?
April 10th.
Right, so this doesn't have the latest state aid numbers?
Yes, it does.
This one does?
So basic formula aid is 165. Wait, basic formula aid, 165, 376. So our increase is $165,376.
Right.
Right.
BOCES aid, yes. Okay, only because I'm looking at, this will make sense in a second. If it's not correct, we'll go back and we'll realize that I did my math incorrectly.
I
So-
can share with you the, I didn't bring it up here, but I certainly can scan it and email it to you the state aid breakdown
Okay,
runs,
all right.
so that you can see.
So I do have a number of questions, and before I ask the questions, I want to make this clear to you guys. It's most important for you and for anybody who's paying attention to the meeting. Doug, we've talked about this in the past. I use a lot more words than you do when I ask questions, and because I use more words, sometimes it comes out the wrong way. And I have more than once been accused of some kind of, malevolent intentions behind what I'm trying to do as a board member. And I just want to make it clear that when I ask questions about spending, taxation, whatever it might be, that it's not, for any ill will. And so, to make this clear, so you guys can kind of mark me down in advance for any votes in the future, if you need anything for children, we need revenue for kids, for their education, for their extracurricular programs, for their sports, for their music, for whatever you need for kids, put me down as a yes and, vote me yes, put my name in a bold and underline it, okay? That's no problem. I have no problem with funding for children. If it turns out that we need money for kids and we don't have the revenue to support that in terms of state aid or from taxation, we need to ask more of our taxpayers. The only thing that I would ask is that we've done our due diligence, we found ways to move money around, we've been creative about it, we've found ways to do it. And if it turns out we need more money, you can sign me up for that too. Vote me yes, okay? I'm willing, as you know, to go door to door and beg people for whatever it is, as long as we're doing right by children. So that is not at all the basis for any of my questions about the way that this is. But I have to tell you that the budget is making me very uncomfortable in a couple of ways. I'm hoping that we can provide some clarity on the way that it's structured, okay? So I hope that makes sense. When we look at, I want to look at the revenue increases comparing last year versus this year. And then we're going to start with how much more money do we have to work with as a district. Okay, so let's make sure we have that accurate. The way I see it here is that for state aid, our basic formula aid, we have an increase of $165,376 last year versus this year. That's an increase of 3.5%. We have an increase in BOCES aid of $34,617. That's an increase of 5.66%. We have an increase in small government assistance of $79,795. That's a 40% increase. And then we have a reduction in other state aid of $50,000. That's a decrease of 33%. Then finally, our local share that we ask our taxpayers for is we're asking for an additional $179,490. That's a 1.8% increase. So altogether, from our top 5 revenue sources, which account for the bulk of our revenue, we are now looking at an increase of $409,278. That's a 2.62% increase from last year's budget. There's some other stuff in here that really doesn't account for all that much. Other revenue sources are an increase of $74,000. But if you look at our top 5 revenue sources where you can really compare apples to apples last year versus this year, we are starting with an increase in revenue of $409,278. Did I miss something?
No?
All right, so we're right on. So we have an increase of $409,278. That's an increase of 2.6%. Seems like we could, do good things with that money. But here's the problem. And this is the challenge for school boards and for administrators, because a lot of this stuff is kind of imposed upon our district by people who don't have any clue how we should spend our money or don't particularly care. And this is the frustrating part. Of that $409,278 that we kind of have to run our district, we shouldn't need more than that. I mean, I understand costs increase and we have some raises in here that I'll go over. But already $356,821 of that, 87% of the money that we're getting in revenue last year versus this year is accounted into an increase in health insurance.
Yes, and we had discussed that at the last meeting.
And the issue that's hard to accept, I know you asked questions about it before, but if you came and you said, our teachers got new insurance cards that are going to entitle them to some better benefits, they're going to have some decrease in their premium or some decrease in their pharmacy benefit, or they're going to get better doctors or better care, then I could understand this. But they have the same health insurance cards, they have the same benefits. Our teachers aren't getting anything for that $356,000, and our taxpayers certainly aren't either. That stinks. To have to take our $409 that we ought to be able to do great things for our children and immediately ship it out of our district to some insurance plan. Now, I tried to find out today, how much the insurance plan spends on administration. You might know that. I couldn't find out what the CEO makes or anything like that.
That is
but
changing because he's going to be gone.
well, good, because, I mean, I'm sure that he's making a good penny. I mean, as most insurance company CEOs are making a fortune, and not doing right by the patient. Again, this is going to be misconstrued in many ways. I could already hear it. I'm not talking about taking health insurance benefits away from teachers. What I'm saying is that we're not giving them anything except for taking an additional $356,000 out of our budget and shipping it to some insurance company. So now that leaves us with a very small amount of money to actually run our district and give our kids what they need. 13.86% of our total budget is accounted for by that $356,000 increase in health insurance. So that's where we're starting from. So I guess I don't have a question except to say that that's unfortunate.
It is.
And if it continues like this, how are we going to be able to fund our district? I mean, maybe we need to ask for more taxes, I don't know. But I mean, we can't, that's not sustainable. And I know I asked you last month if this is a one-time phenomenon or, going forward, but we had a significant increase last year as well. And if you watch the news, you find out that, healthcare, it's not going to change. I mean, nobody's going to...
No. Last year actually was not enough of an increase, and that's why we're experiencing what we're experiencing this year. Last year, they were too conservative. They should have increased it more so that it could have been balanced and you wouldn't have had the spike. But also, you have to understand that the Affordable Care Act has created a great issue with insurance across the country and cost of health insurance. I don't have facts and figures, but I know it has caused a great problem. And we do need to research alternatives. I
don't mean to put you on the spot.
No, I couldn't agree with you more. I think $23,000 a year for a family plan is a lot of money.
Again, I mean, if we were giving our teachers some kind of gold card that was going to give them something better...
Well, you have to understand that this is soon to be considered Cadillac health insurance because it is that close to that. This is top of the line health insurance.
Yeah. Well, look, that's for somebody else to suggest the quality of health insurance. But I'm just saying that when you're given $409,000 more than you had last year, and you want to take that money and you want to do right by children, and you have to send that money to some insurance company, it's sickening.
It is. Can't disagree.
I'm sorry. It's
No,
a
it's
national
true.
problem, Brian.
It is.
Yeah, it
This
is.
isn't just our school board.
It is.
This is what you're seeing is the effects of Obamacare.
Mhm.
We throw it out there for everybody, but somebody has to pay for it in the end.
Yeah, no, I get it, Mrs. Jennings, but
It's a
here we
shame,
are
but
as a
it's
board
true.
now.
It's a discussion that needs to be across our nation, and
Yeah, I just don't have any hope that anybody's going to stand up and do the right thing at the federal level or even the state level. So here we are as a board now, whereas we should have $409,000 to give our kids, we now have, what, 40?
correct.
So that's just, I guess I'm venting, but, so now, we take that money that we've been given to provide for our children's education and their extracurricular activities and their sports and all, and we have to try to stretch that in some way, okay? So then we have raises. We have contractual obligations to our employees, to our administrators, and that eats up a lot of the money, right? And I think it's important, and I'm not calling anybody out in particular, but I think it's important to just say this out loud. This is where we're having to spend our money based on contractual obligations. We have $48,111 of contractually obligated raises for non-teachers, okay? We have to give our teachers $56,000 more, that's part of the contract. Our teachers educate our children. I'm not going to argue against that, I have no problem with that. So the increase in the teacher salary line is $56,434, and that includes the retirements and the resignations we've had, okay? When we look at the rest of our raises we have to give, we have a $5,500 increase for our superintendent, $11,500 increase for our business administrator, a $14,000 increase for our maintenance staff, a $1,900 increase for our high school principal. We have a $4,663 increase for our elementary school principal. We have an increase of $4,959 for our guidance. And we have an increase of $5,836 for our transportation supervisor. So we have $48,000 in pay increases for employees who are not teachers, that's a 5.88% increase.
All right, I just want to correct you on something, or clarify, not correct, clarify.
Okay.
For the transportation coordinator, I'm gonna go to that. In the past, the raises were not put in. The salary was left the same. For 15-16, her ending salary was what?
So this
was
accounts
put
for
in.
2 years?
Correct.
Okay.
So that is 2 years' worth of salary.
Thank you for clarifying. So
And it's possible that there are
That
others.
would be any of our year-to-year contractual
contracted people,
employees. That would be true for all of them then.
Yes. Yes.
Oh, so what you're saying is that for, let's say, the elementary school principal?
They have a
That's a
negotiated
contract.
contract.
Okay, so
They are not in that group.
in that particular instance, I've not, and is this okay? I'm glad, this is public information, it's in the budget. The elementary school principal budget line for 2016-17 was $102,581. For next year, it's $107,244. That's an increase of $4,663. That's a 4.55% raise. The point I'm trying to make is that after we get done shipping all our money over to Orange Ulster Health Plan to pay for the CEO and his travel, we now have a little bit of money left, and we've already had to spend it based on contractual obligations to employees who are not teachers. Then we have to pay our teachers an additional $56,000, and this is with the benefit of a retirement and 2 resignations. And I guess the point that I'm trying to make is that this budget, while we can get through another year potentially, is not sustainable. So, I just, and there are things that we need to be spending money on that we're not spending money on. We know that. You don't have to acknowledge it. I mean, there are things that we need for our kids that we've not been able to spend. So, here's my problem. We have more revenue. We have to spend it on things that we don't want to spend on, that nobody's going to benefit from. But we have some cuts in here. And I know that in your presentation you explained some of these cuts, but I just want to dig a little deeper. Because the one thing that I'm not ever going to be willing to do as a board member is to take something from children that they need. And I'm not trying to sensationalize it. Please correct me if I'm wrong. But if I look at the programs for students with disabilities, it's the section labeled 2250, and it's on page 5. I'm looking at salaries for K-6 teachers under programs for students with disabilities, salaries for the elementary school, and I'm looking at a decrease of $139,268. That's a 63% decrease. Then I'm looking at non-instructional salaries for programs for students with disabilities, and I see a $7,000 decrease, a 9% decrease. Then I see a decrease in the BOCES services for programs for students with disabilities, a decrease of $100,600. That's a decrease of 6%. All told, when I look at the 2250 section, programs for students with disabilities, I see a decrease of $176,657. That's a 7.5% increase. And I know that the presentation suggested that we're backfilling this in some way, but could you clarify that?
Sure. Well, the K-6 salaries, that is this partly the 139 is partly the speech teacher salary. The other part of that was someone who was budgeted in the wrong code. It should have been in the 7 through 12 code.
7 through 12. So we have an increase of 69,235. So to clarify, if we take the 139,268, I'm just going to do the math real quick here. If we take 139,
70 grand.
okay, so we have a $70,000 decrease
And that would
in
be
salaries for special ed.
That would be the speech teacher salary,
Okay. And how,
which we are getting through BOCES.
but I see a decrease of $100,600 in BOCES services.
Well, also included in those BOCES services are all of your children who go to BOCES for your 811, your 411, your 611, your 812s. And we've had a decrease in enrollment in those programs. People have moved out of district. So they're very expensive programs. So if you have 1 or 2 students who move out of that program, you could potentially decrease that by $70,000 to $80,000.
Okay.
And graduates, we had graduates last year who left the program. When those BOCES services are done, it's done according to a budget, and I share it with the special ed department, I share it with the high school, so that they can go through and see how many students are budgeted for what service, OC Ed and special ed. And they come back and tell me how many services we need to budget for. So there was a decrease in the services that were required.
I do see that it's fluid, to be fair. I mean, in 2015-16, the budget for BOCES services for special ed was $1.29 million, and last year was $1.59 million.
Yeah, we increased it 300,000.
So there was an increase. But my fear, I hope you can hear this, is sincere, is that when you get into a crunch like this, where the revenues just aren't there to support the programs, that you get forced to cut things that you should never, ever, ever cut.
So this part, to be clear, this part, the 2250 programs, they're all cuts based on enrollment.
For the BOCES,
And the one retirement.
that is correct.
Okay.
Yeah, but so the speech teacher, correct me if I'm wrong, I think what you said is that we're going to replace the speech teacher with additional services from BOCES.
Eight
So
800
COSA from
hours.
BOCES, yeah.
Which is a lot less costly than having a full-time teacher on staff.
I don't know. I mean,
We're not cutting any services that are mandated
it's just a
to
lot of money. It's a
children.
$180,000 cut.
And I understand what you're saying. And yes, it looks astronomical, but we are not cutting any services to children. Those are mandated services. We cannot cut those services.
Everything in 2250 is a legally mandated service.
Those children need the services that are provided under that budget code
It's
according
IEP
to their
driven.
IEPs.
And the IEP, though, is a local decision. In other words, we have an IEP committee. We make decisions locally on who qualifies for IEP services. In other words, if somebody qualifies for IEP, then they're legally mandated under this category. But if they're not deemed
It's
qualified,
done on a committee basis.
Yeah, you could speak to it better than I could.
You're talking about two different things.
okay.
These are special ed students served by the committee. I think you're talking about general services provided to all students which fall under other budget categories. These are
Not all students. I'm talking
These-
specifically about
this is-
students with special needs.
Right, and those decisions are made by the Committee on Special Education, which is a committee of teachers and the parents of the children. There's never
And
been a
advocate.
child in this district who's been denied a service that they need. And I can guarantee you that for 16 years. So I don't know where we're going with this, but this is what we explained.
We're not going I'm not.
There is no reduction in those services. There are recodings. There are reassignment of the services to other budget codes through BOCES.
Well, no, within the category, there are no recodings. The category of it's, you're
So
recoding within
what
the
is the,
category.
what is the question?
My
Ron?
question is, there is a reduction of $176,657. There's no reassignments to other categories
Right.
outside of that
And
number.
Ruth
That's the cut.
explained that already. That's a reduction in services. The Committee on Special Ed has to submit what they project for the following school year. That's how the budget is created. We have this kid who's going to stay in this program. This kid is progressing. He's probably not going to need that program.
We might have an 11th or 12th grader who's going to be
Graduating. And those
partially in the
costs all move
special-
off.
The special ed program and then OC Ed as well. He might be half and half and half.
And then there could be a meeting over the summer where their original projection turned out to be incorrect. And they have to upgrade the services, and then the services are added back in. But it's a budget projection based on the best available knowledge at this point in time. It is fluid and it can change. The speech teacher retiring accounts for a good portion in that overall reduction. We are also eliminating the almost $62,000 in costs through BOCES for the Committee on Special Ed chairperson, and we're bringing that back in-house and assigning it to somebody in-house.
Is that in this budget?
That's part of that 100,000 also. is
And
the-
reduction in BOCES
Committee of
services. So
Special
62,000 of that was the individual who's serving as the Committee of Special Education chairperson.
Where is that?
That's in that
But the
2250
BOCES services.
490 BOCES services.
No, I see where it's taken out, but where is it? Where can I find that $62,000 elsewhere in the budget?
You're not, because the duties are going to be reassigned to a current staff member.
That's what I mean. So
Salary's
in what?
already in
So
there.
that's for salaries for elementary teachers.
Well, that would be K-12 at that point, wouldn't it?
It could be K-12, but the person who is going to be assigned those duties is a K-6.
So
Oh, I see.
for K-6 salaries, so this is, in teaching regular school, 2110, this is page 4.
Mm-hmm.
Teaching regular school, there's no designation for special ed here.
No,
Salaries K through 6, I see $59,140 increase. That's a $59,140 increase. I don't see 62.
you wouldn't see 62. They're already receiving a salary. They're just going to be.
They're
So
already
we are reassigning an individual who's currently doing something else to manage what we're taking.
Correct.
So then,
We're maximizing the use of our workforce,
okay.
okay? We did a thorough analysis of who was doing what and who wasn't doing what. And we made some very prudent decisions based on the flexibility people had in their schedules to better serve the district and make sure we were getting the optimum use out of every one of our staff members.
Okay, so here's the challenge for board members. There's an important level at which you just defer to your administrators and you trust they're doing the right thing, and we do that, and I do too. But when you see, cuts under special ed budget lines, and you don't understand the details. I've never seen any detailed plan on, rejiggering our staff and realigning, and I'm sure the board hasn't either. I hope no board member has seen that, because I haven't seen it.
Nobody's
So-
seen it.
So I don't know what you're talking about when you say you're going to take a teacher out of a classroom and put them into something that we were paying BOCES to do for special ed kids. I have no clue what that means. And so how am I supposed to feel good like I'm doing right by the children in looking at a $180,000 cut in special ed services? That's why I'm asking the questions.
And I think we've answered the questions.
Then let me think about the answers, because
Right, Brian, understand that this is a very fluid process, okay? As we made these budget projections, resignations had not yet been submitted. Retirements had not yet been put in. We can't openly discuss plans until we know who is doing what,
Okay.
okay? Because had people not resigned, had people not retired, the administration may have had to make other recommendations, which would have been more difficult and less palatable.
Okay. No, I understand that.
And I can't come to the meeting and give you detailed plans when all of the plates are still in the air.
Shouldn't-
So these are your budget projections for next year.
That makes perfect sense. But shouldn't we have some level of comfort that when we are going to take a teacher from a classroom, as you're suggesting, and plug that individual into services that we previously procured through BOCES for special ed students, that there's a plan to backfill that individual so that we're not just taking somebody from a place where we have needs for our kids.
That's what
we're
we've
taking
been
that person
explaining. Every position is being backfilled.
But I mean, I know we've had a reduction in enrollment. We all know that. But it's always been my understanding that it wasn't as significant of a reduction in enrollment where we could actually make wholesale changes in the number of teachers we have aligned.
Part of what you pay me to do is to look at our staffing structure and analyze it critically. That's what we consistently do. Every position we've been discussing is being backfilled by somebody currently on staff. We will be able to give a much more detailed presentation without names, okay, in the next couple of months. But all of these pieces are still fluid. So this is the projected budget. And yes, to answer the next question, if some of these pieces don't fall into place, I will be coming back and making more difficult recommendations, and they could include things we don't want to discuss.
We won't have another budget vote until next year. I want to make sure that we are confident that we have the amount of revenue that we have to ask for to support programs that don't require the elimination of anything that would affect a child
Ruth
in
and
one
I are
way.
presenting to you the most responsible budget we would recommend this board put forth to the public. That's what we do every year.
I understand, but I mean, the pressure is always to stay within the tax cap, to only ask the taxpayers for what we feel like they're going to vote for. And at some point, I guess the point that I'm making, especially with the healthcare and the situation that's well beyond our control, is that maybe at some point, you might have to ask us for something
Some point, we
more.
may have to if the healthcare costs don't come under control.
Right.
But there are still things. When I was appointed to this position 7 years ago, we made a series of fairly drastic budgetary changes. which stabilized our position, but we were still using undesignated fund balance to balance our budget. There's always been a second restructuring that we've put aside. And now with the decline in the enrollment, the increase in healthcare costs, we're starting to implement some of that phase two.
It also helps to have stability in the business office to be able to watch the trends. And for the last several years, that's been a difficult thing. And to come in as a new person and try to get that in order, it takes a lot of research, a lot of looking at the numbers. I feel very confident in this budget.
Okay.
I do. We are not cutting any programs or services.
But
If a student moves in the district and they need special ed services, they're going to get it, because I will find, we will cut spending, or we'll freeze spending on other things.
But that's the problem is, and I appreciate that,
I'm
Ruth, is,
talking about spending like maintenance. You do what you have to do to keep your buildings going and your preventative maintenance. I've instituted a preventative maintenance plan
Yeah.
here so that we are not putting out fires and paying twice as much to repair things when they break.
I'm not trying to catch anybody. I'm
No,
just saying that.
I
Brian, come
appreciate
July
you
1st,
asking this question.
this document becomes even more fluid than we're discussing now. As students enroll over the summer, you have no idea who requires special services, who might be a BOCES student, who might be a student you have to send to the Center for Discovery. None of that's in this budget. We must make cuts otherwhere and other non-instructional line items
Right.
to offset those expenses, and we do it every single year because we have no choice. We are mandated to provide those services. We will not get aid on those students until the subsequent school year.
I hear you loud and clear, but I don't think I've only been a board member for a year and a half now, but I've been participating for long enough to know that we've never seen anything like this kind of increase in health insurance premiums.
No.
And I don't see, there's no hope on the horizon for this getting better.
No, there isn't.
So,
But that, as
On the other hand-
Mrs. Jennings said, we're
No.
not the only one dealing
no,
with it.
I get it, and I'm not trying to lay that on anybody. I know you guys are certainly doing the best you can, especially with you with the work your Orange Ulster role. But the fact is, that is what it is. So it doesn't matter what happens in the outside world. Just like it doesn't matter what kind of ridiculous mandates we get from the feds and the state government on how we should teach our kids, even though they should do it otherwise. The fact is that when we're here at this table making decisions, we're stuck with whatever those decisions are. So we just have to make the most of it. And I know you're working the hardest you can on the budget, and I do appreciate the professional organization of the way that our budget's laid out. That is much appreciated. But it's the board's responsibility to inform our administration on what our priorities are. And if our priorities are to never, ever, ever touch something sacred, then we tell the administration, if you have to come back and say, hey, you have to get a tax increase, or you have to go try to, beg for some more money or whatever it might be, that is the direction that we need to provide. So maybe I see it differently because I'm still learning, right?
I don't think we're at that point yet.
Okay.
And
I'm not
we're not.
saying that we could not get to that point, because we certainly could if things continue the way they are, but we are not at that point.
This is probably the last round of restructuring that we can do without going to ask for an increase in the taxes.
All right, here's something that you're asking for, which is much appreciated and deserves congratulations. You're increasing softball budget by $3,000, spring track by almost $4,000, and indoor track by $2,600.
Can I just interrupt you a minute
Yes.
before people hear this and think that we're increasing our athletic department to the tune of, what I did was, if you look, you may see some other lines that were cut, because again, numbers were put in for
Yeah.
these programs, and they were never really accurate
Sport A may
numbers.
spend more than Sport B.
Gotcha.
We move
So,
money
That
from
makes
B
sense.
to pay for A.
In April, I send a list into CBO, move money from this code to this code, because I don't want negatives.
But you also see football restored.
I do, I see football. I see overall an increase of $8,167 in sports. And those are the things that we need to be doing for our kids. And so I just don't want to ever get to the point where we say, man, we have to satisfy our health insurance premiums, we have to do our mandated, state items, but we just can't afford to cover the spring musical.
Never, I don't agree.
I know you would, I don't know you
If there
want.
was anything in this budget that I felt was going to compromise program in any way, it'd be brought to this table and you would make the final decision on it.
All right.
And you would know that in January when we first start the process. If we felt that that was the direction it was going, we would certainly inform you right off the bat so that you could assist us in making those decisions.
But if we can identify things that we can do more efficiently with existing staff, we are certainly going to use our management prerogatives to do those things.
Absolutely.
Because we wouldn't be doing our jobs if we didn't. And at this point, that's what we're recommending.
I know everybody feels this. I feel it personally. I'll share my own feeling the way I feel it. It's on my shoulders like a ton of bricks, just like it's been for you for 10 years and you for 11 years on the door, or 10 years, 9 years and 10 years. You like have to vote on something. Like you put your name on a vote. I take it very seriously, and everybody on earth is judged by how we care for the least among us. And the number one priority for every board member is doing right by children. That's why I'm asking the questions. I'm not giving anybody a hard time.
And I
I'm just
appreciate
trying to
that.
do my due diligence.
I just want to point something out to you. What I like to look at is the current year expense as compared to the revised budget,
Yeah.
as compared to the proposed budget. Not necessarily a dollar change amount in here, because that's last year's budget to the proposed budget. That would be the dollar change.
Right.
I want to know what we actually spent compared to the budget.
Okay,
Okay?
Yes.
that's fair.
Because this tells, look at, now, the school year's not over,
Right.
so we're not done spending it, but, that's 350,000 or 324,000.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
No, I appreciate
So
that.
that's,
But it's really not apples to apples, because I don't know how far along we are.
But I monitor that on.
But a lot of that
the
is what
fiscal year
Ruth and I
is
do annually.
June 30.
Brian, we usually sit down in December and put a spending freeze except for instructional items, in effect.
Okay.
With the intent of trying to put the brakes on our spending so that we always have the money to do what we need to do. And we've been doing that every year. Mr. Clark said it. What did you say? We're the second most efficient district in the state? Or something like that? Okay, we have our budget pretty much down to the bare bone.
But listen, I'll say that, again, I've complimented you because as I went through this, you've done so much moving back to where we need to be that it was actually hard to follow. So that's a compliment, because I can tell when somebody is following accounting principles and doing things the right way, and that is clearly done. So congratulations. And I know, Dr. DeFore, I've complimented you in the past on being able to take the money that we have and maximize it for our kids. I just feel like I have a responsibility to say it out loud as often as possible to make sure that we understand what the priorities are. We all do as board members.
Yeah.
So, all right, I have just a couple of more specific questions. So, under the hospital, medical, and dental insurance category, 9060, it's on page 9 at the bottom. The increase in health and dental insurance paid to Orange Ulster Insurance Plan is $301,979. That's a 15.3% increase. We also, however, have significant increases in health insurance buyout and Medicare reimbursements, and I was just hoping that you could provide some clarity on what those things are.
Well, again, everyone who took the buyouts, people will sometimes change in October. Open enrollment is October, November, December. So if they choose to take the buyout rather than the health insurance come January 1st, now it's not in the right budget line.
So in other words, a district employee's spouse has an insurance plan, they
Correct.
choose to participate, so they,
can take-
okay,
yes.
gotcha. All
And
right.
that saves the district a lot of money, the buyout.
Okay.
And the Medicare reimbursements, that increase is due to Medicare increasing our retirees, their contract says they retire after 10 years of service with 100% health insurance. That is inclusive of Medicare when they become Medicare eligible. And what happens is, they receive their Social Security check and their Medicare premium is deducted from their Social Security check. Every quarter, we reimburse every retiree for all of the 3 months of Medicare premium. And it just increased because now it's not a stable fixed rate, it's a percentage based on what they receive. So that just increased.
All right, so included within our contract with the faculty, just to clarify, if a teacher is employed for 10 or more years, when they retire, they have 100% health coverage for eternity, for themselves and for their family.
If they retire with a family plan, yes, they do.
And if they have Medicare premiums deducted from their social security check, the school district reimburses them for those premiums.
But Medicare becomes primary, our
Yes.
plan becomes
Second.
supplementary, and is a different cost structure when it
lower
becomes
rate.
supplementary. It's not as high of a rate.
Correct.
So again, we're beholden to the folks that make decisions down in Washington on this, and in this particular case, this year, that Medicare reimbursement line is costing us an additional 146%. It's a 146%
Well, that's
increase.
because in the past, they just put an amount. If you look at that budget for 15-16, what's the amount?
15-16 was,
26,000. Oh, excuse me.
sorry, 16-17 was 26,000.
Correct. And that's not the correct amount that we pay out.
Well, this year so far, we've spent 24,469,
Correct.
and we're budgeting for 64,000 next year.
Right, because I asked CBO to go through and do a spreadsheet on who is receiving the Medicare reimbursement and how much, so that I could budget it correctly for next year, because I want it in the correct line. I don't want to have to move money out of health insurance.
Money from other lines was used to reimburse last year.
Out of
So
health
it's not accurately an
insurance.
apples to apples, okay?
Correct.
But still, it's a 60, it's budgeted for next year for $64,000.
Yes.
A significant chunk of change for Medicare reimbursements.
Yes,
Okay.
it is.
All right, thank you. And I just have one last thing. It's going to take me a while to look it up, so if you guys have questions, jump in. Oh, yes. Cool.
Go ahead.
All right.
Find it?
Are we talking about the bus lease, or should we?
You can,
Okay.
certainly.
So, the bus lease, I read the press release, and it's proposed as a, quote, cost-neutral plan. And again, let me just make this clear, guys, please. I'm not arguing against or for the bus lease. This is not a statement of value on whether we need to do it or not do it. I'm simply doing the math, okay?
Okay.
I just want to make sure that what we say is true. The bus lease is budgeted for $290,000, okay? That's under contractual, under district transportation services. This is page 8, section 5510.
Did you receive my email where I told you, I explained what that 290 comprised? The lease itself is about 283.
Okay.
The other 7,000
Oh,
is
yes.
for contractual, like if we need to take one of the vans or the maintenance trucks into a dealership for proprietary diagnostics.
Yep,
You need
okay.
to have a contract for that, so that comes out of contractual.
Gotcha.
Towing comes out of contractual.
Okay.
So that's the kind of thing. Copy machine comes out of contractual in
Okay.
that line.
All right, so 283 is
Roughly,
basically the cost.
Approximately, yes.
So we take the 283, okay, that's the cost of the lease. Now so it's 283 of basically new spending. We've never leased before, so that's 283,000.
Correct.
But there are things that we don't have to spend money on anymore because we now have, bear with me, supplies, bus parts, fuel. We're reducing our budgeting for fuel by $25,000. I understand based on your reply that that's based on the efficiency of the new buses.
Correct.
So based on the efficiency of new buses, we're decreasing from 80,000 down to 55,000. And the 80,000 was overstated because we haven't spent nearly that much.
Correct.
But there's a reduction in fuel, bus parts, lubricants, tires. Those are things that obviously you don't have to spend money on when you have a fleet, a lease fleet, okay? So if I take all those things and I subtract them from the 283, I now have 163,300 of new spending. So $163,300 new spending for the lease. The cost of the lease minus the stuff that we spend on our own buses. So then we're going to sell our buses. So we're going to sell our buses for $73,300 because it's $72,000 plus $1,300 for scrap metal.
That's a very conservative estimate for the revenue.
Worst case scenario, we sell them for $73,300.
So I say 75.
Okay, let's say best case scenario.
75.
We sell them for $75. I'm sorry, I'm just going to do some math here.
That's all right.
So we have $163,300 minus $75,000, which is now $88,300. So from what I can tell, and again, I'm not suggesting that we don't lease the buses. I'm not saying that at all. I haven't decided. Leaning towards yes, we do, because we have to have safe vehicles. Okay, so that has nothing to do with whether or not. But that's not cost neutral, that's an increase of $88,300.
I cut other lines in the budget in other areas.
All right, what did we cut?
I cut in maintenance, I cut fuel oil for the elementary school by 10,000.
By how much?
10,000.
And so we just believe that the cost of fuel oil has decreased to the extent that it's going to continue like that through the year.
Well, look at what's the current expense is 15,900, 16,000, and we have budgeted 50,000. So truthfully, that's probably over budgeted. And we could cut that, use that extra towards the bus lease. It's always good to have a little
All of the
cushion
decisions are made
there.
on history.
Okay.
They go up, they go down, they find a midpoint.
All right, so we're down to $78,300 increase.
All right, so, and I also cut in 1621 supplies, $22,000.
These are supplies that we just don't use. So we're down to,
I'm not saying we don't use them. If you look at the budget line, it's high, but that's probably because, again, things are not being coded where they should be.
I shouldn't have even asked the question. I'm not trying to micromanage. I don't care when it comes to stuff that doesn't affect kids. I'm just saying that,
And also.
can we get to
when,
zero? We're going to keep subtracting, but does it get to zero?
Eventually, 2070, I also cut $20,000. So now where are we?
What's 2070?
That's in-service training, something that has not been used, so. get rid of it.
In-service training for teachers?
For everybody.
We don't spend any money on in-service training?
We have a
We do-
grant that
we
covers
have
that.
grants, and the maintenance, I have, through BOCES, I have all my in-service training for my maintenance staff through BOCES.
So I'm not trying to be
Health and safety
difficult, but does
officer
the $20,000 grant for in-service training, does that come into our budget somewhere that we
No,
can see in
it's a
revenue?
federal grant.
Nope,
So the
never-
grant comes in, gets spent, not show?
None of those grants ever show up in our revenue projections. Title
Okay.
I, Title IIA, the REAP grant, they don't show up under revenue.
Okay.
So where are you at now?
So 22, 20, we're at,
Brian, I can assure you, Ruth went through the budget,
But it-
and she was told that everything needed to zero out, and she'll go through it line by line with you if you want, but as we explained.
it's not me, I'm only one person voting on this, but I'm just saying that
We previously explained this. We went through this budget line by line to make cost reductions to ensure it was cost neutral.
listen, and I'm not trying to give you a hard time, but we never had a discussion about how we made this
Yes,
cost
when
neutral. We said it's cost neutral, but we never went through
when we-
the explanation of it.
When we presented the proposal, we said other line items would be cut throughout the budget to make it cost neutral, that coupled with the sale of the existing fleet. And we did go through every item line by line over the past 2.5 months.
What- I don't remember ever going over line items. I mean, we've seen PowerPoint presentations where we're having high-level
You were
summaries.
provided with all of the
Well,
breakdowns.
but I'm just one person, Dr. DeFore. I mean, I'm just, we're all just 5 board members.
Continue through until we get to zero, please.
Where are we?
We're at 36,300.
36,000?
Mhm.
Salary substitutes operation of plants, $8,000.
Substitute for
Operation
operations?
of plants.
So this is substitute custodians?
Correct.
How much?
8,000.
Okay, that's 28,300.
Supply, supplies and contractual, Lord. Supplies, operation of plant, 1,000.
I don't know that we can take our budget.
I did,
And-
this is how I did it. Every line, I took a little bit out of every
All
line.
right, so I'm
because
gonna
I
take
looked
some
at the
blame for this because I
historical.
remember saying a couple months ago that we need to go out to our taxpayer/voters and explain to them what this bus lease means. What I didn't mean is we should go dissect our budget and find every cut that we made based on our actual spending and attribute that in some way to make this look cost neutral. That's not what I said at all.
That's what we said we were going to do.
But that's just, I mean, that's...
There was no intention that this was going to cost the taxpayer additional money.
No, but
and
I think
that's
when
why
you
we
say it's
went
cost
through
neutral, I think
every-
what you're suggesting is that you're dealing particularly with just transportation. I don't think we're trying to say that we're going to lease the buses and it's cost neutral because we've done other things with our budget across the
We've never
board.
represented that.
But, I mean, Amador,
It's
you
a
think
budget.
people read it that way?
No, it's a budget.
But they're, no, they're,
That's cost
on the
neutral.
ballot, they're voting on the budget, Amador.
Yes.
But then they're also voting on the bus lease separately.
But
I think in most people's minds,
they have access to this if they want to go line by line as well, because this is a public document, and it will be available in the elementary school, the high school, the superintendent's office, and the library. And I can put it in the 2 town halls too.
Okay, that's fair. That's absolutely
And
fair.
anybody who wants to, and if they want to call and ask, I will go line by line, because that is how I had to do it, to make it cost neutral.
I think we would have been better off if we just explain why we need the bus lease. On the basis that we need to have the bus lease, that we need safe transportation for
I think we
kids.
explained that as well too.
But I don't know that, tinkering with every aspect of the budget outside of district transportation services and adding that all up because we simply didn't spend the money. So the fact is, we didn't spend the money, we reduced our budget for next year based on our actual expenditures, then we all bundle it up and we say, hey, it's cost neutral. And that, look, this has nothing to do with the bus lease, it's about just sincerity. It's just not the appropriate way to
I think
communicate,
that's the
with people.
wrong word to use, Brian.
All right, not sincerity, it's,
Because you're making it sound like we did something
no,
underhanded.
not at all. I didn't mean to
That's
say
what
you
the word
didn't.
means.
I didn't mean, so I think, again, I took blame for it earlier. A couple minutes ago, I said that I remember clearly saying this. When we ask our taxpayers on the ballot to approve this bus lease, let's make sure that we've communicated with our taxpayers why it's important to do. Okay? I know you didn't try to, pull one over on anybody.
Absolutely not.
But we've gotten a little creative with the way that we found places in our budget where we simply weren't spending the money.
No, I think you're misunderstanding. What I've done with the budget is try to bring it into a realistic point. For years, there have been lines that have been incorrect. And based on the expenditures and the historical expenditures, those lines needed to be corrected
Oh, I agree.
anyway. And yes, if that allows us to do the lease and not increase any burden on the taxpayer, then I don't understand why there would be an issue.
Okay. That's fair. That's all I have, guys. Thank you, Ruth.
You're welcome. And I'm.
And if it came across confrontational, please don't take it that way. I'm just trying to do my job as a board member. That's,
Anytime you want to come and sit and talk about this, please.
thank you. Well, I'm sorry. I just have one last thing.
Go
here.
ahead.
On the 4th slide that you presented earlier, I'm not worried about tech support. Okay. Elimination of 2 days per week of psychological educational testing.
Yes.
Reassigned to current full-time district psychologists. I'm
Yes.
assuming that was a service that was provided previously by BOCES.
Correct.
What is psychological educational testing?
When a student is referred to the committee, the first step is to do psychoeducational testing. It includes IQ testing, but it is a psychological battery focused on education, reading level, math level, reading fluency, math fluency. And we're required to do that on all new referrals, and we also have a cycle we do it on. It has to be done for classified students every 3 years.
Okay. And we had sufficient capacity with our existing psychologists to be able to transfer
Yes.
those services to that person without
The
compromising
individual we're
it.
moving into the CSE position has a counseling certificate. That individual will be picking up some of the counseling load from the district psychologist, who will be picking up the testing load from the BOCES personnel we're not using anymore.
Third bullet point is elimination of CSE services, counseling for special education. Did I get that acronym right?
Chairperson for special.
Chairperson for special
The
education.
Committee on Special
Committee on Special
Education.
Education.
Yeah.
Elimination of Committee of Special Education Services, reassigned to current district staff along with any additional counseling services. So this is an instance in which we're taking from BOCES and moving to an existing employee who's currently doing something else, which we can't talk about because it's an individual. When something like that happens, where we're doing it through BOCES, but then we're moving it to an individual within the district, does the Board of Education have any role in deciding whether that's an approved move, or is that at the discretion of the administration to
It's
move
a
around
management
rosters like that?
prerogative.
So you can do that without any kind of board approval?
Yes.
Okay. That's all.
Anything else?
No.
I'm good, you'll see.
I was wondering about the 800 hours. How do we come up with that versus 700 or 900
It's 20 hours a week for 40
Is it-
weeks.
per,
And it's based on what is currently being serviced.
so the current
The current.
enrollment of CSE
Yes,
students?
yes,
Okay.
So you're talking about
for speech.
3 days a week?
Yeah.
3 days a week.
But that'll go up
For the
and down
school year.
with enrollment.
But BOCES
Yes.
services are bought either by the day or by the hour.
Okay.
Point of information, please. I have a question regarding the bus lease. Ask you now or reserve
Oh, no, you can ask.
Okay. I'm referencing the information that's on the website, the Elgin Central website. First page is entitled Elgin School District Proposes Costly for Transportation Lease to upgrade aged school buses. Further down in the document, it says Elgin buses transport 619 students and travel over 250,000 or about 273,000 miles a year. So when you go to that, then you go questions and answers about the proposed bus lease, which is on another page. So I went to that. How does mileage on the lease work? The lease will allow for 12,000 miles per year per bus. Our average in-district bus run is approximately 10,000 miles per year per bus. Special runs may result in higher mileage. However, the buses can be rotated so as not to exceed the 12,000 mile limit. Okay, so you're talking about 14 buses and 2 mini buses. That's 16 buses, an average of 12,000 miles per year. On the lease is 192,000. If we use 272.
It's 12,000 miles per month. No, per year, I'm sorry, you're right, 12,000 miles per year, sorry. Go ahead.
We're talking 192,000, and on the first page, you say we do 273,000. So that's a difference of, what, 81,000?
Well, that's what we report on the ST3 is the mileage. That includes the vans that are used. We have another minibus that we're not getting rid of that we use. We have currently have more than 16 vehicles in the fleet.
Okay, well.
And we have a
I think it's
Suburban.
logical question.
Mhm.
If you go over 12,000 miles per vehicle, what is the consequence?
We're not going to over 12,000 miles per vehicle.
Okay, so we're gonna pick up the 81,000 in some other manner.
Correct. It will be in the other minibus we're keeping, the vans, because we run 2 vans out to Middletown, and Goshen for special programs. We have a Suburban, we run out to Matamoros for a special school. We have a van that we run up, a minibus that we run up to Center for Discovery.
So in your investigation of the leasing program, what would it be, what would the consequence be if we went over 12,000 miles with one bus?
Well, it would be a cost per mile over that would be negotiated at the time that the lease agreement was.
Okay, and has the board been informed of that?
No, because we have no intention of exceeding it.
Okay, thank you.
Can I follow up on that? I've done too much math and my brain can't handle it. So I didn't follow your math, Mr. Clark, but what I did here is, again, I'm not personally
It's
criticizing
okay.
you, because I'm the one who said we needed to go out and sell this thing. But is it totally appropriate to take vehicles that are not part of the bus lease, that we fully intend to keep as district vehicles that we own, and add their miles in comparison to what the bus lease is going to be?
I asked for the total mileage in the district.
But we're not, the communication
That's
about the
what
bus lease was intended to get people to support the bus lease, okay? Or to at least understand the bus lease so that they can make an informed
And
decision.
we're not saying that those lease buses are not going to do those other runs from time to time either. They very
Personally,
well
I
could.
feel I'm so sick of politicians fudging things and making things,
understand what you're saying.
saying things that are just misleading because, and they know they're doing it. I'm not suggesting that you knew that you were doing it or had any intentions to do it, but if we're talking about the bus lease to our taxpayers and we're saying that this is the number of miles that our fleet drives, and we're specifically talking about the bus lease, we shouldn't be including miles in vehicles that aren't part of the bus lease. It's just not, it's just, I don't have the right words for it.
I think that was just a
It's-
point of information about how many miles the district actually does.
I would suggest that
transporting
we'd be
students.
much better off if we, guys, Doug, Amador, as a board, were more visible and more available to our taxpayers so that we could make the case to them. We wouldn't have to make stuff up. Not make stuff up.
Yeah, I don't think you're
So that we
making
wouldn't
anything
have
up.
to be so creative in pulling a bunch of numbers and to make our case for us. We ought to be able to go out to people and say, hey, we need new buses for our kids because they're not safe and they need to have them and you need to give us the money for it. It'd just be better to do it that way than to have to be this creative.
Honestly, I don't think that it's being creative. I think it's putting forth the facts of what the district currently does, the mileage it does, the amount of students it transports. It's not being creative to try to get anybody to vote yes or no on anything. It's the facts and figures that are reported to
It's
the
what the
state
transportation
that our
department
transportation state aid is based on.
Thank you for your question, Mr. Clark.
Anything else?
No.
Okay. So, we need 2.01, approval upon the recommendation of the superintendent to appoint Catherine Byrne, Kenneth Byrne, and Fritz Kaiser as custodians/inspectors for the budget vote scheduled for May 16, 2017, at a rate of $12.50 per hour. Can I have a motion for that?
I make that motion.
I'll second.
Okay, Brian makes the motion, Amador second. Any discussion? Then let's vote. Brian?
Yes.
Amador?
Yes.
And I'll say yes, thank you. 3.01, upon the recommendation of the superintendent to approve the 2017-2018 County Board of Sullivan County Board of Cooperative Education Services administrative budget in the amount of $2,828,374. Can I have a motion?
I'll make that motion.
Second.
Amador makes the motion, Brian seconds. Any discussion? Brian?
And I just have to, there is discussion, Doug. I
Okay.
have to say that this is just an uncomfortable spot for me in that we have the three of us here. If I vote no or abstain on this, we can't pass this motion, right?
Yes.
Sure you can.
We can pass with two?
So it's a majority of those present.
I think it's the majority of the quorum.
The quorum is 3, so 2 to 1.
I'm certain that it's three.
3 is a quorum.
Yeah, I know, but I think we have to have a majority
So
vote of
if 2
three.
vote yes and you vote no, it passes.
So I'm going to vote yes because I understand that differently. I think we have to have 3 votes. I think we have to have a majority of the number of the board members, regardless of how
No,
many
you
people are
don't.
here.
Brian, you're correct.
Not a
I'm-
majority of the board members' fault.
I'm certain of that, Dr. DeFore.
Majority of those present.
Then vote no.
I'm not going to vote no. I would have normally abstained from this because I don't have any clue on how BOCES manage its budget or its finances.
And the purpose of the April the 6th, April the 6th dinner meeting that BOCES puts on.
I went there last year. I'm not sure that if I sat through that dog and pony show that I'd have any different feel for how they manage their budget and their finances. But again, I'm
Well,
certain.
Susan does a pretty good presentation on, in terms of presenting the administrative budget, which, again,
Yes.
is the only thing we have.
Well, I'm going to trust that, the majority of the board understands this, and if I abstain from this, I'm certain, Dr. DeFore, I apologize, but I'm certain that this
I
would not
don't
pass.
think, but I will check it in the
Okay.
law book.
I'm just going to vote yes.
Okay. Amador?
Yes.
And I'll say yes as well. Okay. Approval to cast one vote for each of the following vacancies in the Sullivan County Board of Cooperative Education Services Board. For
I'll make a
Mrs.
motion.
Mrs. Carol Bleefernick, 3-year term from Eldred. Mrs. Ann Coleman, a 3-year term from Liberty. And Mrs. Susan Horton, a 3-year term from Monticello. And Amador made the motion.
I'll second that.
Thank you. Any discussion? Very good. Brian?
Yes.
Amador?
Yes.
And I'll say yes. 303, approval upon the recommendation of the superintendent that the following resolution be placed on the May 16, 2017 ballot. The Board of Education of the Eldred Central School District is hereby authorized to expend $17,172,172 during the 2017-2018 school year. Can I have a motion?
I'll make that motion.
I'll second that.
And Brian second. Any further discussion?
Say that placing a budget on the ballot is the easiest thing that board members get to do because we don't have to make the decision
don't
at all.
make that
We simply
decision.
give that power to the people, which is where
Absolutely.
it belongs, and so for that reason, I will vote yes.
Thank you. Amador?
Yes.
And I'll say yes as well. Approval upon the recommendation of the superintendent, the following resolution be placed on the May 16, 2017 ballot. that the Board of Education of the Eldred Central School District is hereby authorized to levy taxes annually in the amount of $14,500 and to pay over such monies to the Board of Trustees of the Sunshine Hall Free Library.
Make a motion?
Amador makes the motion,
I'll second that.
and Brian seconds. Any discussion?
Just have a question on that. Has the Sunshine Hall Free Library ever asked for additional funding from us, or are they satisfied with the 14?
2 years
A couple of
ago.
years
It
ago, they
was
did it.
11,000 for the longest time.
And then it was 10 before
10,000
that. So
for the longest time.
they've done it, yeah, Mohammed, you remember that. It's gone up at least
It's-
3 times in the past 7, 8 years.
Gotcha, okay. But in this particular case, this is what they're requesting?
No, this, we always put what they request. We do
Okay,
not
yeah.
touch it, we don't tinker it. They submit a letter to me, and it goes on the agenda as they submit it.
Okay.
And that's actually passed by their Board of Trustees.
Okay,
All we're doing is collecting the tax for them. So they're actually putting that to the voters themselves by requesting we put it on our ballot.
okay, gotcha.
So we're just the administrator of the funds.
Okay.
Okay, any other questions?
No.
Brian?
Yes.
Amador?
Yes.
And I'll say yes. Thank you. Approval upon the recommendation of the superintendent that the following resolution be placed on the May 16, 2017 ballot, that the Board of Education of the Eldred Central School District is hereby authorized to enter into a lease agreement to acquire 14 66-passenger school buses, 1 24-passenger school bus, and 1 20-passenger school bus equipped with wheelchair access. The term of the lease shall be 5 years at a total cost not to exceed $1,405,000, which shall be raised by tax upon the taxable property in the school district to be levied and collected in annual installments in such years and in such amounts as may be determined by the Board of Education.
Make that motion?
Second.
And again, this is one of those things where all we're doing is putting something on the ballot.
Just like old Greece.
Just like what?
Just like Greece. We just give it to the people. We don't know. Makes our life so much easier when you don't have to decide for people, and they can actually just fill in a bubble.
Okay, Brian?
Yes.
Amador?
Yes.
And I'll say yes. Approval upon the recommendation of the superintendent that the Board of Education of the Eldred Central School District approve the 2017-2018 property tax report card.
I'll make that motion?
Second.
Any discussion? Then let's vote. Brian?
Yes.
Amador?
Yes.
And I'll say yes.
And Brian, Paul, I apologize, you are correct. Quorum is required to conduct a school board meeting, but to take official action, it has to be a majority of the board itself, whatever that number may be.
I love that school law book. I read that, at night.
It's written by your arch nemesis.
Sorry to hear that, Brian.
It's written by who?
Nisbet.
Oh, boy. Oh, boy.
Know the enemy.
Okay, ladies and gentlemen, that brings us to item 4, public comment. Yes, sir.
First of all, say I'm disappointed that we weren't allowed to speak on the agenda items. I spoke on the bus lease because I thought it was appropriate during our presentation. I have an issue with 2.01. As you well know,
Can I say, Mr. Clark, I'm sorry to interrupt, but I think that was probably an oversight because I heard you, Doug, on a number of meetings actually explain the prior to consent agenda. We just didn't have it laid out that way in the
Yeah.
consent agenda. I don't know why. This is the first time we've done this
Yeah.
where we vote on.
Yeah, it's a different format.
Yeah, I apologize for that. I'm sorry.
I'm sorry to interrupt. That's normally the order, and Doug's normally very careful to explain that
Yeah,
people have
and-
an opportunity to.
And
the
Mr.
reason-
Clark, I wish you would have, said something, because I certainly would have, relented to that.
I try to be good.
Okay.
I have a problem with 2.01. As the board well knows, there was an issue at this year's election. Many people went out of this school district with a sour taste in their mouth that the election was not quite properly run. Now, these may be some things that the board doesn't hear from people, but those of us who are on the outside hear from people. We hear some things that you don't hear. We heard that there were people, election inspectors, overlooking people's ballots. I know that two of the people who you're putting on as election inspectors are the parents of one of your compensated teachers. I view that as a very big conflict of interest. I think people might be intimidated coming in to vote and knowing who other people are, and that their vote may be spread around the neighborhood who they voted for. And I think that this board needs to regain the trust of the people in this district, if anything's going to happen in the next couple of years. Because the next couple of years is going to be extremely difficult. I don't think it can be done. I don't think the school district can be saved. But if it is going to be saved, it needs to be saved with the trust and the understanding of the people and the cooperation of the people. So I think this board should go avoid any conflict of interest whatsoever in regards to their budget vote and the vote for the next board member. And I'm not trying to disparage or run down any particular person. I just think it's bad practice. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Any other public comment?
I just have a concern regarding the, once again, health insurance. I know everyone knows that Middletown has dropped out of the Orange Ulster Co-op that we're a member of. I know that you mentioned it a few months ago that if they dropped out that it would increase our premiums or there would be some sort of ripple to our premiums because of that. Do we know at this time what, if any, and how that's going to affect us?
No.
Okay. Are we having those discussions with anybody? Are we looking down the road any further than right now?
Oh, we will definitely be discussing it in the next meeting because now they've actually put it in the paper that they are leaving, so. The health insurance plan right now is working on replacing the executive director, getting things cleaned up, and addressing those kind of issues where districts are pulling out and how that will affect the plan.
And then the last thing, because we do not have your budget, what new programs are the students going to be getting? Other than football, I heard, what else are the students getting out of this budget that you were proposing and putting forth for a vote?
We're looking to add some more AP classes up at the high school.
Okay.
Class offerings, mostly.
There's at least we passed it out at the last meeting, a half a dozen new offerings up at the high school, new classes. Mr. Krebs isn't here, and I don't have them off the top of my head, but I know there's quite a number of new course offerings because the teachers and the guidance counselors have been working on that for the last couple of months. So there are some new offerings.
Okay. Any new extracurricular activities, any new clubs?
It's hard to say any new because if someone comes to administration with a viable idea and they have enough students, we give them an opportunity to try it, to see if it works. Many of our teachers will bring the idea forward and run it on trial basis on their own time to build up the interest for it. But the only time we've ever said no is if they fall down below like 5 kids and it just doesn't become cost effective to do it. I mean, ski club at one time had 30, 40 kids going. And then all of a sudden I found out we were sending a bus with 7 kids on it. That became untenable to do. But if another group of kids, and it depends on the interest of the kids, if a group of kids came, hey, listen, we want to go skiing, we get the advisor together and provide it. We have that money in the budget so that we can make those type of offerings.
That's what my concern was.
You know, so there might be something we do this year that we're not going to do next year, but it may be replaced by something else.
Okay. And just to piggyback off of what Mr. Clark said, the information that is on the website, just from speaking to community members, is very confusing regarding the buses. I know that this is something that the district needs for the safety and well-being of our students, as well as our drivers. We really need safe equipment. So I know that it might not have been your intent to be a little misleading, but people have done the math, and they're saying the same thing that Mr. Clark did on the numbers don't add up. We're going to break these leases, we're going to break the agreement before we even, take the buses off the lot for the first time. So just to let you know, that's what I've heard in the mix from people. So
You have to address that.
Yeah, you might just want to clarify a few points. But that's it.
I just want to respond. to what you said, Dr. DeFore, is that invitation for people to come forward with ideas for extracurricular programs is useful, because I think people probably do have ideas, but I think a lot of people get locked into this idea that there's things we just can't do because of the financial realities of whatever it is. And so maybe people kind of have stopped asking. And I just feel like, again, I hope this came across loud and clear. I'm not going to rehash it, but when you get an extra $400,000+ to spend, you ought to be able to do really good things. Now, I get that, we have to spend money on health insurance and other things. It just stinks. But if there's something that we could or should be providing for the kids, I feel like, our community would probably say yes to that. So I appreciate the invitation, and hopefully some ideas will come forward. I have noticed, to just very positive feedback, I've noticed a lot of really cool things happening at Mackenzie. And in particular, the 5th grade now, the one who took out the kids for sleigh riding for an hour and a half, which was fantastic. They're going down to the river and collecting water samples and bringing in the National Park Service. Mrs. Lombardi brought in the recycling coordinator from Sullivan County. We're rich in resources in our community outside of our school here, particularly with some of the new folks that have moved into our community. And I love that we're actually taking advantage of it. So sometimes it doesn't even cost money if you're just willing to kind of open your mind to bringing in some new stuff for the kids. So I appreciate the invitation.
Even within our budgetary constrictions, I like to think we do really good things here, Brian.
We do. I hope I give you credit when I observe those things. And people have been inviting the board to participate in these things, and whenever I can, I take advantage of those opportunities. I'm just saying that, if I'm not speaking the way that I am here at this chair and asking for more for the kids, I'm not doing my job. So I hope you hear it that way.
Any other public comment? Then we need a motion to adjourn.
Make that motion?
And a second.
Second.
Any discussion?
I'm sorry, I must have jumped the gun on this. The minutes for the last meeting we're going to be approving at the next meeting.
Oh.
It's not on this agenda.
Right.
Yes, we will be
This is a
approving it at the
special
next-
meeting.
Okay.
Is that the discussion?
That's the discussion.
Okay.
Yes.
Yes.
Good night, guys.
I'll go right to the wire.